And I know that because, my dear watchers, Helen was hatched from an egg. Yes, Helen, the daughter of Zeus, who transformed into a swan to lay with a married queen, and then the queen laid down 2 eggs, and one of them cracked, and Helen popped out. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Inclusivity Unlock 3 podcast. Today, we are hopping on a very controversial topic. Yes, in this video, we will address the casting choices in the Odyssey movie directed by Christopher Nolan and the truth of why film creators and even book authors are trying to modernize and change classical work. And to ask the question of, should we as a society be mad about this and call it propaganda? Now, in case you are not online that much, Christopher Nolan movie The Odyssey got the most dislikes on a trailer on YouTube before it was released since Snow White live action adaptation. So we are gonna dive deep into the reason for that hate and what does it say about us as humans. So let's get into it. To start, we have to understand the purpose of books and films and why they exist. In a previous episode, I talked about how since the start of humanity, people always felt the need to tell stories and reserve them for others to learn from them. Just like how cavemen would carve their hunts on rocks or walls, or the fact that all religious scriptures came as stories, because it's in our human nature to learn from stories. And all good stories exist because they have a value and a lesson for us. And later we'd have other ways to tell stories like theater plays, and then in the modern ages, cameras that captures these plays and stories and present them to, as what we call now, films. So again, they exist because they want to teach us a lesson that will help our morals and evolve us as societies, or at least that's the ideal reason. Now, because the most recent work and our main topic of today is the Odyssey, we will start with it and try to break it down. The Odyssey is basically the classic of the classics because it is one of the oldest surviving works of literature. It is one of the 2 major epics of ancient Greek literature written by Homer. What's impressive about it is that it was written more than 2,000 years ago, and it's still relevant to this day and age. What is it about? To simply put it, without spoilers, even though, again, the story is 2,000 years old, so if you don't know it by now, what are you waiting for? But anyways, it is about a legendary hero's way to return home after the Trojan War. But of course, it was not that easy because the gods were against him. So the journey took over a decade, with crazy events happening that makes you wonder, how did he survive all of this madness? Now, of course, I simplified it, but even reading the modern English translation, the story has a lot of characters and gods and goddesses that requires the reader to have huge knowledge on Greek mythology to understand the story thoroughly. So back to the Odyssey adaptation by Nolan, it got so much hate for a couple of reasons. One of them being that he hired Labuta Nyong'o, a black actress, to play Helen, the abducted queen of Sparta. People were so mad to the point where they wanted to boycott the whole movie for a black actress, which tells you a lot about how sad and shallow the society we're living in. And let me explain why. The hate comments are super angry about the fact that this choice was wrong and that it's not historically accurate, which was enough for me to be 100% sure that they don't know anything about the Odyssey, because they think it's real. And even those who know it's not real never actually read the story or anything related to Greek mythology, because if they did, they would never react this way. And I know that because, my dear watchers, Helen was hatched from an egg. Yes, Helen, the daughter of Zeus, who transformed into a swan to lay with a married queen, and then the queen laid down 2 eggs, and one of them cracked, and Helen popped out. So nothing could be accurate to that. Oh, but she's from Greece. She's from a god of thunder who transformed into a swan. That's all she is. And this is exactly why this Nolan interpretation matters, because in a society where we are not ready to educate ourselves on a certain topic before raging and judging it, even though it requires zero rage and hatred, then it might need to be forced upon us. And if you want to call this propaganda, then go ahead. But also, just so you know, even hundreds of years ago, in the Greek theater, they even changed and reinterpreted their own stories shortly after the originals to add another flavor or another lesson on top of the primary one. And even our character of the week, Helen, had huge reinterpretations back then. And one of the most famous ones is Helen play by Euripides, written over 2000 years ago, where Helen is actually a ghost. Yes, the abducted queen that was one of the reasons for a decade-long conflict was nothing but an illusion, because the real Helen was hidden in Egypt. Also, if you are interested to see how Helen was portrayed in the ancient plays, I have the pictures for you. Y'all would not survive this version, and it shows. Also, funny thing that back then in theater, when the description of the character being the most beautiful, and then the character appears and they see only huge, scary masks, nothing in the history showed that they minded that, because as a viewer, you have the ability to imagine, and it shouldn't stop you from understanding the story or the moral of the story, because that would be superficial, wouldn't it? Also, Helen being a ghost, even 2000 years later, that plot is still crazy. And another reason why Euripides decided to change the story of Helen is for the purpose of unfolding a very important topic, which is how most of the wars are caused by nothing but lies and illusion. Another play that had different interpretation is Ajax, a play by Sophocles, written also around the same time as Helen play, where we take another point of view from a soldier who has done more in the war than Odysseus did, but with no applause or praises because the gods favored Odysseus. Sophocles' Ajax teaches the danger of arrogance and triumph of empathy, and personally, it kind of made me hate Odysseus. But see, the reason why these ancient Greek playwrights and poets changed an already iconic stories isn't because they were lazy or they couldn't think of a new play, but because they believed that these plays and myths were shared stories among society, and each writer used them to explore different philosophical or political question and point of views. They didn't think the original material was wrong, but they thought of a new way to present it for the viewers. And this isn't just for Greek theater, by the way. This has been a thing over the years. Let's take the one and only William Shakespeare, for example. William Shakespeare had many iconic plays that are well known to everyone worldwide, and most of us know them by heart because of how well written they are. But still, his plays also had millions of interpretations, one with small changes and one that changed everything from changing race to changing plots, and you will be shocked by some of these interpretations. So I will give you some example of the most famous ones. Number one, West Side Story, a famous musical by Arthur Lawrence, set in the 50s in New York. It is a modern interpretation of Romeo and Juliet. What changed is instead of rich family rivals, it became about racial and immigration tensions. Yes, they changed the character's ethnicity to fit the moral of the story. And of course, we are going to talk about this later. It's very well done because these minor changes spoke to a new audience. Number two, Richard II, where Richard II is a woman played by Fiona Shaw in 1995. And I'm sure if this play was happening today and accessible on social media, people will not let it pass, even though nothing in the story changed. And this interpretation was done not to piss off the viewers or to disrespect the original material, but to give it another purpose, even if this purpose is to show the presence of women on stage. Moving on to number three, and this is my favorite, 10 Things I Hate About You, 1999. I'll give you a second to guess which play it is based on. Yes, you guessed it. It is based on one of the most craziest misogynistic plays The Taming of the Shrew, where it's about a husband who starved his intelligent wife so she can start to obey him, even if he was wrong. But the screenwriter of 10 Things I Hate About You decided to turn it into a very light-hearted rom-com that is loved and appreciated by everyone, and also a story that fits the new generations. See, directors and screenwriters changing these famous plays is not offensive or disrespectful in any way to the original material because they didn't erase the original material. It's still there. They simply added new valuable lesson or perspective to it and to fit the our day and age, because yes, believe it or not, some of these 500 years old stories can be a little outdated. Oh, but why don't they create new stories? They do. New movies or books are all out there, and they do include modern values and lessons. And if you want to talk about the percentage and ratio of reinterpreted work, it is very small. However, there are reasons why they exist since the ancient times. So let's talk about them. Number one, instant emotional engagement. Audience already know the characters and their fate. We know that Helen will be abducted. We know that Snow White will get poisoned and saved by a prince. This foreknowledge allows the writers to build an immediate suspense and tension to the viewers because it will make them wanting to know what could happen to the characters if this one thing happened to them. Number two, political and social commentary. By altering already existing and famous stories, it shows a very direct commentary on what is going on in our society now and how far we came after all these years and changes. Again, using Taming of the Shrew as an example, the original telling should not pass in today's age, and seeing the difference of how the story is presented now is honestly amazing and something that we as humans should celebrate. Number three, exploration of human psychology. Retellings allowed us to have more relatable human motivations and actions. It is a way of including a more diverse audience. It is also a way of representing more personalities and traits that we can relate to. Now, these points prove that retellings are not lazy or they exist to disrespect previous and cultural stories, but they exist because it allows classical tales to continuously evolve and meet new audiences. We have seen examples of tales changing ethnicities of some characters like West Side Story, because yes, Romeo and Juliet had great lessons, but having racial tensions in the story made it more valuable in today's age. And we've seen male roles being played by women because years ago, stories and plays always gave the main role to men. And now we are witnessing a reinterpretation of a story where the characters are played by diverse actors, and we are losing our minds over it. And you cannot tell me racism doesn't play a huge part, because if you are on social media, you will see how these people comment on it, and you will see how some of these comments are to the point where they ask AI to generate pictures, humiliating pictures and videos of the actress just to mock her and for other to think it's real and to rage even more. And did you notice how the majority of these people are the ones with zero knowledge on art or literature or even films? Yeah. So, how do we fix this? Do we as a society need more history lessons on why these stories and art exist in the first place? Or do we need more directors to take bold moves like Nolan did to show people that it's totally okay? Either way, I think now, after 1 week of the movie release, it is safe to say that after all these hate comments, the movie still broke records and got the highest ratings. So next time you see a change on a story that you know nothing about, get educated and use your media literacy. Think why they did this interpretation. It's 2026. Let's be smart and open-minded. And see you in the next episode.